I wasn't planning on announcing this tonight, but might as well just say it. I think tomorrow morning, if not by noon, by tomorrow morning in the next 48 hours, I am submitting an amicus brief to the Supreme Court, arguing for why they need to overturn Colorado's disastrous decision to try to keep Donald Trump off the ballot, because it's the right thing to do for this country. And as somebody who's been trained in the law, I feel like a sense of obligation to do that if somebody who understands the Constitution. It's my belief that every other Republican, myself included, needs to withdraw from any ballot that forcibly withdraws Donald Trump from the primary.
All right, folks. So while that clown show of a CNN Republican debate took place last night, yeah, those of you who were there on stream know it was painful to watch. Vivek Ramaswamy did a town hall with Tim Pool in Iowa, and I want to just react to some of it because I thought that the voters at this event really did come to the table with interesting and good questions. I did also notice much of the audience, it is Tim Pool in fairness, but much of the audience was very young, which says something about the new generation that Vivek also speaks to. I, as Gen Z, certainly appreciate that. And like I said, nothing more to say. I want to just play some of this, talk about it, react to it. So without further ado, let's get into this short intro, but that's about all I have to say. After I gotta just clear my palate of the pain and just nonsense we witnessed on CNN last night by watching some of this, and you guys have the freedom to watch it with me. So here we go.
Hey.
Candace, gentlemen, I appreciate y'all making it out here, braving the inclement weather. So I got out of the Marine Corps about a year ago, largely due to how the current administration handled, as Ian so correctly frames it, our surrender in Afghanistan, as well as the way service members were treated in regards to the COVID vaccine mandate. And though I appreciate your answer to the first question, Mr. Ramaswamy, as Commander-in-Chief, do you have any plans as it relates to restoring Americans' trust in our military institutions? And do you intend on holding military leadership who implemented these disastrous policies accountable?
And again, before he gets into his answer, let me just say props to this kid for that question. And it's such an important question. You talk about things that are relevant to Republican voters in the country as a whole. Yeah, our military enlistment is way down. Nikki Haley said the other day she thinks it's just because of wokeness. And don't get me wrong, yeah, Biden, all this diversity crap in the military has a big thing to do with it. But it also has to do with the problems that are fundamental to Nikki Haley herself, which is the endless wars, which is the lies they have sold us. And, true story on that front, I'll tell this really quickly. When I was young, I was obsessed with fighter planes, like from 5 years old to about 10 years old. It was the only thing I cared about. And obviously, I thought extensively when I was young about maybe being an Air Force pilot. But by the time I was about middle school and by high school, it confirmed it. I looked at the state of our military, even under the Obama years, and just, you look at the recent history, the endless wars we got into, the just uselessness and nonsense of the things we were doing. And this is before the diversity crap even came to, the forefront and the limelight. I was just simply disaffected with the idea of ever even doing it. And I think that's how a lot of people feel, truly. So, and not to say like, oh, if things turned around, I would join the military. I think I've decided already what I've done with my life. But I think this is a conversation a lot of families are having right now. And it is a real national security problem because you have a record low enlistment number. I mean, that's not good, obviously. Okay, I'm going to stop rambling. Let's listen to what he has to say.
Yes. And I think the way we're going to restore trust isn't by fake jingoism. It's by actually acknowledging the failures and instituting accountability for those failures. It comes on a couple of levels. First is generations of foreign wars that have not advanced our interests. Yep. $7 trillion of our national debt owed to the wars in both Iraq and Afghanistan that palpably could just look at the results. 20 years later, for God's sake, the Taliban is still in charge. 20 years later, Iraq is a more broken country than we showed up, sending tens of thousands, about 15,000 of America's sons and daughters' lives sacrificed in those two wars, adding $7 trillion to our national debt.
And, it's a funny story about that. I think maybe I was in 7th or 8th grade. I don't know. We had this conversation several times, but I remember my dad, who's not some type of hippie leftist, let me say by any stretch of the imagination, sat me down and said, son, never join the military. And if they bring back the draft, I want you to leave the country. Because he was very adamant about this. I do not want my son to go have to fight in this pointless bullcrap, right? Because he watched the Iraq War, he watched Afghanistan. This was, in the mid 2010s. And at the time, even when I was young, I agreed with him. I said, yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I'm 100% with you. And, it's not a cowardly thing. Oh, you're not a patriot. You just are opposed to the idea of service. But this is how a lot of us feel, which is, why should we join an institution that doesn't advance American interests, that lies to us, and that sends us to pointless conflicts? It's very true.
So yes, I do hold accountable the bipartisan foreign policy establishment, some of whom are back at it again, available on the Republican ticket to be voted for U.S. president, to be trotted back and to bring back a Dick Cheney vision for our foreign policy that should be relegated to the dustbins of history. So yes, we need accountability. I think we also need accountability in the nearer term for the self-hatred that our own military is perpetuating in our own ranks. And there's a connection between these two. I'm referring to the rise of sort of the woke infection in our U.S. military ranks. These are not two separate issues. What happened is that General Mark Milley's of the world wanted to deflect the left-wing criticism. Keep in mind, it was generally a Republican idea to favor the Iraq War. The left used to hit him for that, to say, okay, well, we'll just say the magic words, systemic racism, white rage, whatever you want us to say, but go away. We'll blow the woke smoke to deflect accountability for the institutional failure of the military itself. How do we get this right? Restore the true purpose of the U.S. military. What is it?
Again, that's totally true. And this is the problem with Nikki Haley. She tweeted like a week ago about wokeness is the reason our military enlistment is down. Yes, that is true. We're not denying that. It's certainly not helping. But there's a fundamental root level disaffectment with the idea of military service. And it, in my opinion, honestly has more to do with the history of our foreign policy since the Cold War than it has anything to do with wokeness. Yes, wokeness is a factor, not denying that. But there's an overarching problem here that some Republicans pretend they're talking about, but they're not, because they are part of the problem as well. Nikki Haley, prime example of that.
To win wars, to actually avoid wars through being strong in protecting our own homeland right here at home, which is more vulnerable than it has ever been. So I believe that the top purpose of the U.S. military should be to protect Americans against threats, make our national defense spending directed towards our own national defense. That includes cyber attacks, super EMP attacks that could take out our electric grid in a matter of days that we're more vulnerable to now than ever. I do view it as an invasion on our own southern border, and I believe an outward-facing function for our U.S. military at our border, as we talked about earlier, is an appropriate use of our military. And that's how we restore trust. I think people would be happy to serve this country if they knew it was actually to serve Americans rather than to fight somebody else's war halfway around the world so some Ukrainian kleptocrat can buy a bigger house. That's not going to happen on my watch, and I think that's how we restore trust. Thank you.
So I followed your campaign since basically the beginning, and I love your message. I think you could fix this country. We've seen what they've done going after Donald Trump. Indictments, even trying to remove him from the ballot in certain states. My question is, how do I vote for Vivek Ramaswamy without sending the message that I am okay with what they are doing to Donald Trump?
Again, you compare this to the debate last night, such an important question. Honestly, it's how I feel as well, right? I really do like Vivek, but I've also made the case, like, we can't just run from the moment that is Donald Trump right now and what's happening to him and the message we need to send on that front. So, like I said, important question.
I think your question weighs on the minds of a lot of people I met today. What I saw in many of the rooms I was in was a sense of struggle with that question of loyalty. And I think our loyalty, my loyalty, and I know Donald Trump's loyalty and the loyalty of the people participating in this caucus process is to this country. So the question is what's right for the country. Let's just agree with that. Whoever you're going to vote for, that's what matters here. Not loyalty to me, not loyalty to Trump. It's loyalty to the United States of America. I think if you want to, I'm going to be blunt about this. I think if you want to save Trump and save this country, a vote for me is actually the way to go. What they're doing to Donald Trump is wrong. I have stood up against it at every step of this process, to the point of derision, to the point of people have had all kinds of conspiracy theories about me, but one of them, and more popular ones, is there's some kind of Trump plant that Trump and I had some kind of deal early on in this campaign to somehow eliminate Ron DeSantis, as though this was a worthy goal for a guy who's got other things to do in life than to focus on eliminating Ron DeSantis from contention. No.
Yeah, I never bought that.
Ridiculous. But I'm saying that I've been so strongly supportive of Donald Trump in the face of these prosecutions that even many people circulated nonsense like this. I've stood up against, I went to the Miami courthouse, I've stood up against these persecutions. For God's sake, I have actually written a FOIA demand and submitted it, Freedom of Information Act request, to know what Biden told Jack Smith, what Merrick Garland told Jack Smith, followed through on that, taken legal steps, and I hope we get accountability. I think that I wasn't planning on announcing this tonight, but might as well just say it. I think tomorrow morning, if not by noon, by tomorrow morning in the next 48 hours, I am submitting an amicus brief to the Supreme Court. Wow. Arguing for why they need to overturn Colorado's disastrous decision to try to keep Donald Trump off the ballot, because it's the right thing to do for this country.
Wow. That's a big announcement.
As somebody who's been trained in the law, I feel like a sense of obligation to do that. If somebody who understands the Constitution, it's my belief that every other Republican, myself included, needs to withdraw from any ballot that forcibly withdraws Donald Trump from the primary ballot, because that's how you actually stop the brazen election interference in our own primary. If every other Republican nullifies Maine, then it has no impact. So that's the length to which I've gone. And so people know this about me when I'm saying this. At this point, it is my firm conviction that this system, which has ratcheted up the threat level one by one to eliminating Donald Trump from the ballot, will stop at nothing. I'm increasingly certain will stop at nothing to keep this man away from the White House. So I think the best way to literally save Trump is to at least have arguably somebody the system might actually, even some elements of it, prefer less than Donald Trump for what I'm bringing to Washington, D.C. And I think that's also what this country requires. I think they duped him at many steps. They told him you can't fire those civil service bureaucrats because of so-called civil service protections. Read the law. Those civil service protections do not apply to mass firings. Mass firings are what I'm bringing to the D.C. bureaucracy. So I will honor the man, and I have, and I think it's the right thing to do, and I will do it as the next president, because he kept us out of foreign wars that didn't advance our interests, and he grew this economy. Those are no two small accomplishments. But our America First agenda does not belong to Donald Trump, just as it doesn't belong to me or anybody else up here. It belongs to you, to us, to we the people of this country. And we owe it to this country to make sure that movement does not end with Donald Trump, which is what the system has set up to do. I believe we're being led into a trap right now, and it pains me to watch it. So I'm asking you to do the right thing for this country. If you want to support Donald Trump even, or what he represents is actually more precise, the right way to do that, to see this through for the country, is a vote for me in this Iowa caucus on Monday. And I think there's an emotional component to this. I actually think we need to vote with our brains. There's times when you vote with your heart. There's times when you vote with your brain. Your heart can get you to the doorstep of why America First matters, but now voting with your brain is asking, are you going to look back? Here's the thought experiment that I'd like for every voter in this state to go through. And I think a lot of them are considering myself for Trump heading into Monday. Do you think you're going to look back a year from now and say, whatever, God forbid, happens this year, say we were shocked by what happened? I mean, last time it was a man-made pandemic and a tech-rigged process leading up to an election that we all know was absolutely an unfair election. That was last time. What do you think they're going to do this time? Are you going to be shocked next January and say, oh, I was shocked that happened? Or are you going to say, we should have seen that coming? And I think it's exactly going to play out. If it's not me in the nomination slot, it's going to play out exactly the way I laid out. It's going to be Trump in a two-horse race versus a puppet who they can control. One way or another, they're going to eliminate him. We're going to look back and say that should have been obvious, when in fact right now people are behaving as though it's not. And we're going to regret the result. And I don't think there's a good chance, I don't think we have a country left, not the same country that we know and love. And so we owe it to this country and to our founding fathers to make sure the 250-year experiment does not end this year, and that we have yet another 250 years and then some left to go. That's why I'm asking you to vote for me. If you want to save Trump and save this country, vote for me. And I hope that gets you to the place where you make the right decision for this country. Thank you, man.
And that's the right answer to give. when you're in that position. Now, for the record, I don't know if I'm entirely sold on the idea that it's necessarily his time, his moment yet, but it does make you like the guy, especially looking into the future, which some other candidates in this race, the way they've handled this question has probably raised a lot of red flags with people going into the future. So, like I said, definitely the right answer there. And I like the guy. It's true. I do.
I think we have enough time for two more.
Yeah, sounds good.
Two more questions. What's your name?
Tim.
Good name.
It's a great name.
It's okay.
Again, I made this comment in the beginning, but look at all these young men. Okay, you love to see it. What have I been trying to say for a very long time? Young men are a gold mine waiting to happen for the GOP. You talk about young women and how liberal they lean, and I've been bringing up these numbers. I'm bringing up the stats. I've been talking about the sentiment I feel in my generation, and they're just kind of waiting for someone to appeal to them effectively and sort of wake up to them, or wake them up, I should say. And I think you can partially tell from some of the demographics of this crowd, that's what's happening. And I definitely appreciate that. And I think regardless of what happens in the Iowa caucus or the primary in general, Vivek has done a very good job of being heard and of arguably engaging maybe a demographic group that I've made the point, I think is actually much more favorable to conservatives in the GOP than they think, but just is not engaged, right? And, I think you see from the demographics of this crowd, that's good news.
Hi, my name's Timon, and I have a question about civic duty voting. I'm trying to get my friend to get on the Vivek train, but he likes a lot of most of your things except for civic duty voting, and so I have his concerns. He just doesn't think it has a point to it. Young adults voting, there's no other way to get young Americans to vote besides making it harder. The test will only hurt the Americans who don't have access to good education or resources, so poorer communities is what he said. Also, you're an adult at 18. You can be tried by court. You can go into the workforce and be a part of the community. You should be allowed to vote without taking a test like an American citizen, is what his concerns are.
Cool.
Right. So for context, Vivek basically believes there should be some type of civics test to, be able to vote, which I think is a pretty reasonable and shouldn't even be a super radical opinion. If you're voting on important decisions, you should have some level of qualification to do that. But, most people don't get this. But Vivek threw the idea out there. It's been very controversial. I totally agree with it, though. But anyways, let's hear.
So what I would tell your friend is, first of all, I would say this in a friendly way, relax, in the sense that this anything touching this would require a constitutional amendment. But why don't we talk about forgetting the plumbing of how we accomplish it? Let's at least see if we agree on the spirit of it, which is that in order to be a full citizen of a country, and citizenship is not about what you get, it's actually about what you give. Women didn't have citizenship and didn't have voting rights in this country. People think it means, what do you get? You get the right to vote? No, women were citizens all along, didn't have the right to vote. So if you actually trace our history, what's the origin of citizenship? Citizenship is about allegiance. It's about duty. It's actually why I don't believe that dual citizenship is a coherent concept in the United States. It's all about, or about any country. It's about allegiance. It's about, and with allegiance comes a duty. So with that said, the basic point I was making is, what's your basic duty at least we should expect of someone to a country? Some people will make cases for mandatory military service. I don't. But I think the basic table stakes of your duty to this country should be to know the bare minimums about this country and the Constitution and our history.
Which I think is reasonable.
It's mainly just the Constitution and the way the government works. And we know that that's an intuition we already track, because if you're an immigrant to this country, we say, you can't vote. You can have all kinds of other benefits. We give all kinds of benefits to illegal immigrants to this country. There's all kinds of things we do. But at least when things have worked the way they're supposed to, you can't vote in this country until you become a naturalized citizen, which requires you to pass a basic civics test. And so if we require that of a legal immigrant to this country before they cast a ballot at the ballot box, I think it's reasonable for every high school senior who graduates from high school to at least know the bare minimums about the country that every immigrant has to know as a condition for becoming a voting citizen of this country before the age of 25.
Makes sense to me.
I think it's a reasonable thing to ask. Now, if you've had life experience as an adult, I'm willing to drop it. If you say that you've served in a military or first responder role, great. That's a different way of having allegiance or service to a country. But the bare minimums, so nobody has to take a civics test there, but the bare minimums are to say that you have some knowledge of the country of which you're a citizen. I was here in Iowa, and so this actually generated a lot of controversy. My campaign staff hated me for rolling out this idea because it didn't poll well. I said this idea. They said, "Well, at least can we poll it?" I said, "Yeah, I'd love to see the data." It did not poll well. I came back and I still rolled it out in the speech where I was planning to because I think it's the right thing for the country. So I'm aware that it has not been a friend to my vote gathering process in this campaign.
I will say that is my only concern about this idea in regards to his political future. Like if he's the nominee in 2028 or whatever, or if he's the VP in 2024, who knows, is while I 100% agree with this, I wonder how much it's going to be used against him. Right? Because it sounds to some to stupid people, but that's kind of Vivek's argument, is it not? Is that in the current system, we do have a lot of stupid people who are voting and making up the, tyranny of the majority in many ways, that they're going to see this as you're taking away people's right to vote, and we don't like that. I mean, the Democrats are going to run campaign ads. They're going to take all those words out of context. And so that's my only concern on that front. And I'd love to know what you guys think. Maybe that's an exaggeration. Maybe I'm overreacting to that. But like I said, sometimes that is the consequence of getting too close to the truth. The truth is very unpopular with the masses. Again, I totally agree with it personally, but I wonder how this would do in elections is my only question, assuming this guy ever reaches a general electorate. So again, love to know your thoughts. I do have my concerns about that, but like I said, sometimes the truth is unpopular and you just got to say it. And I respect that.
But I think people have come around to it actually over the course of the year. Some of my other positions have had the benefit of this too, my position on Ukraine or otherwise. But in this one, it so happens, I think people have come around to it. A 10-year-old girl in Iowa, her name is Lena, she came to one of my events having heard about this controversy. She heard me take a beating from it from mostly on the left. They claimed it was Jim Crow or something like this. Everything's Jim Crow. If you're a 10-year-old and somebody says Jim Crow, I think you might think it refers to air. It permeates and it's everywhere. But anyway, she heard a lot of this criticism. And she printed out the 100-question civics test. Most adults in the United States would fail it if they took it right now. 60% is a passing score. She's 10 years old. She comes out with a printout with a handwritten note showing me and telling me that she got 100%, 100 out of 100 at the age of 10. So I don't think this is something that results in some socioeconomic struggle. If this 10-year-old girl in Iowa can know the first thing, questions like, how many branches of government are there? What branch of government does the U.S. president lead? I don't think it's too much to ask an 18-year-old to know what branch of government the U.S. president leads before they show up at the ballot box to cast a vote for the U.S. president. I think that's a reasonable thing to ask of a country. And I think that's what it means to be a citizen of this one. So tell your friend to look at the spirit of that and don't worry about the plumbing so much. Thank you.
By the way, to people who call this anti-American, which they will, if you actually read the Federalist Papers, if you actually look at the specifics of the republic the founding fathers set up, this is more or less the direction in which they wanted it to be, right? They did not want a political system where everyone was voting. There's a reason they didn't construct it as a democracy or ever use the word democracy. In fact, they railed against it. Why is that? Because they understood that there's a certain subset of people in society that probably aren't meant to do politics. Let me just say it that way. It sounds mean and whatever, it's the truth, right? And so by doing something along these lines, you can get into the specifics of it but I would argue by doing something along these lines, you are actually restoring something closer to the original vision of what the founders wanted. Research it for yourself if you want. I'm not going to get super into it. I have a bunch of videos explaining it in the past, but feel free to do so.
What's your name?
Hi, I'm Brittany. Big fan of Timcast. Big fan of Candace. Hello.
Hi.
Okay, so Vivek, thank you so much for being here. I know the weather is not ideal right now, but thank you for being here. So your slogan has been truth, and it's all over this room. Many Americans over the years have felt lied to by our government and that they have pulled the wool over our eyes with so many occurrences in history, especially in the last 4 years. Recently, you have been speaking what recently happened with January 6th, and you're constantly be getting attacked. So thank you for speaking the truth on that.
Thank you.
There have been so many whistleblowers, such as Snowden, to expose the truth to the American people about what is going on behind closed doors. My question to you is, do you have it on your radar to grant pardons to those who told the truth to the American people, and also to release documents that would uncover a lot of unknowns to the American people, or to provide protections to future whistleblowers?
Yes, yes, and yes is the answers to your questions. I mean, I think that
There you go.
so it returns not a pardon, be a clemency, but I think that if you swear an oath to the Constitution, your job is to keep it. And so you cannot systematically participate in the violation of those constitutional freedoms and constitutional rights without exposing that to the public. And I think we, the people, deserve a government that just tells the people the truth again. Not just when it's easy, but when it's hard. Sometimes it's ugly. That's when we need it the most.
Absolutely agree. So I'm going to cut it off there because I don't want the video to go too long or to steal the whole town hall. But like I said, just had to cleanse my palate of the nonsense we watched on stream last night. So with that said, folks, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Here's an interesting question. How do you think Vivek's actually going to do Monday night in the Iowa caucus? Because obviously he's very popular with people like us. He has a base. At the same time, I think about the electorate. I think about the fact that Fox News is constantly slandering him. Clearly, look at Brian Kilmeade and people like that. How does he resonate with those types of voters? The internet is one thing, and then there's also real life. There's kind of a disconnect there. So we'd love to know how your thoughts on how he does in that. I hope he certainly overperforms the expectations. I think that'd be good. But let me know. Like I said, just great stuff. Great to listen to. And actually addressing some hard-hitting questions that we didn't see in the CNN debate. Nothing more to say. That said, folks, be sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Again, let me know your thoughts. And until next time, Alpha Moves only. God bless. Have a very good day and peace.